and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a book video. These are all the books that I have read since last time. I'm gonna separate it by nonfiction, poetry, and fiction. We're gonna start with nonfiction because that's just easier. If I were to describe the books that I've been reading in 2022, it's just books that have been on my shelf rotting for a few years, and I've decided to finally pick them up. So if this is really random for this section, just go with it. Yeah, I'm gonna start with the smallest one. It's called How to Get Into Fashion by Eunice Olumide. Eunice Olumide is a Scottish model. She was the first black model in Scotland, and she essentially said that she wrote this book because she kept getting questions about modeling and about her experience in the industry and stuff like that. So she just wrote a book because she was like, okay, I don't have to answer people anymore. I can just tell them that I have a book. This was a really short book essentially on the very simple, basic aspects of the fashion industry. In terms of how I feel about the book, like I said, it's a very simple book on the different jobs that there are in the fashion industry, and she gives you some motivational words and advice if you want to get into the fashion industry, but it doesn't have a lot of information. It's more of if you're very much like a beginner and you really just want something to kind of motivate you. And I think that if you want to get into the fashion industry, you would need to do way more research than this book provides. But you know, it was just a short little book. For me, it was great because I've just had it in my shelf for ages, so I finally saw what's written in the book. The next two books that I read in nonfiction are biographical sort of books. The first one is called Botafogo na Ponta dos Pés. Botafogo is a Brazilian ballerina, and I have looked up to her ever since I was little because I'm a ballerina as well. I wouldn't say that I got really anything much out of this book in terms of ballet itself. Like, she didn't say anything that I didn't already know pretty much, but I think it was a nice short read that was interesting for me because, like I said before, she's somebody that I did used to look up to, so it was just interesting to see how her life and her career unfolded. Next one, kind of the same vibes, okay? I read Aprendizados by Gisele Bundchen, also in Portuguese because obviously she's Brazilian. Gisele Bundchen, I don't know if there's no way that you haven't heard of her, but she's a very famous supermodel. This book is a bit different than the other one that I was just talking about. This one is more about the things that she has learned in life, right? So it talks definitely about her life in like a biographical sort of writing, but it also is meant to be motivational. I think that Gisele Bundchen definitely has influence to put out to the world, and this was her way, one of her ways of doing it. She's just telling you about her life, what she's learned, kind of giving it to you that so that maybe you can use it as some sort of way that it can affect your life positively. I did get some things out of this book. I think it's interesting for me as a young person to kind of be able to soak in some things that older people have gone through before, because then I can learn in advance. Next book that I read is A Moveable Feast by Ernest Hemingway. I'm not gonna lie, I never in my life thought that I would read an Ernest Hemingway book because it doesn't seem like the type of book that I would enjoy reading, but I actually did really enjoy this one. I love books that have very good imagery and I can just see everything in my mind and it's just nice and pretty. I love that. And this book was this. It's a little ironic because I always say that I hate Paris. I do. It gives me the worst anxiety in the world, but this book made it seem like it was a perfect, beautiful, amazing place. So yeah. This book is just Ernest Hemingway talking about his years that he lived in Paris and his interactions with people. And obviously his writing is good, so it was just nice. I love reading about mundane, everyday experiences and parts of life in a good writing sort of way. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making any sense. It's like I was reading his journal in a pretty written way and I enjoyed it, okay? Anyways, move on. Let's move on to poetry now. I read two books by Leav. I read Love and Misadventure and Lullabies. I got these because I saw a YouTuber talk about them. The first one that I read out of these was Love and Misadventure. Poems about love. Leav's poems are very simple and very easy to understand, and some people think that that's not a good thing, but I think that it's a good thing. I think that definitely she could dig deeper into her, emotions and stuff, but I also don't want her to, because I think that there's value in explaining feelings that usually are so complicated and complex in such a simple and digestible way, and it just makes her poems very easy to approach as well. So that's something that I do really appreciate. I think that it was a very different experience for me to read this book than it is for me to read other poetry books, because when I'm reading other poetry books I just feel insane. But this one I felt calm because I could understand everything the first time that I read it. And it's like there's pros and cons to both of them, right? And both of them are valuable. But I enjoyed this, okay? I don't think it was amazing, but I think, like I said, I value the simplicity of the poems in this book, and I did mark a lot of them. I think that a younger audience or somebody that is just getting into poetry would really enjoy reading Long Live, because, like I said, it's very easy to digest. And once again, it was a very different experience from reading other kinds of poetry. And I like to have, different experiences when I'm reading things, even if they are in the same genre. And it's just interesting to see how different people write about feelings differently. Long Live has this thing that she writes little stories to describe feelings. And I really loved that aspect of her writing. Like, she would just write a little fantasy sort of story, and that would essentially be a metaphor to the feeling that she was trying to portray. And I thought that was super cool and really interesting, and it would always close up really well to me. And the rhythm in this book, it always rhymes, which is not something that to me matters in poetry, but it did feel nice to read and just have everything be like so smooth. When it comes to Lullabies though, it didn't stand out to me as much as other feelings did in Love and Misadventure. It is also about love, but I feel like this one I just didn't relate to it that much, and so I felt a bit disconnected from it. But same concept, simple poems, very easy to digest and understand. I just enjoyed reading Love and Misadventure more. I feel like the poems to me were a bit more impactful, but I did think it was really interesting how she named this book Lullabies, and at the beginning she had an introduction written, and she said that she hopes that this book could be calming for people to read, like a lullaby, and that they could read it before bed and stuff. And I thought that was really cute and really nice. I think that it was nice to have a little experience of reading Long Live and just being so calm and relaxed. Okay, let's finish off this video with my 2 fiction books. These are the books that are most popular currently from this book video. My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh. I went into this book being very interested. I was very curious as to how this book was going to unfold. This book is about a girl who suffers with depression, and she comes up with this plan essentially that she's going to sleep off an entire year because she thinks that that will heal her and help her essentially have sort of a rebirth, and she will leave her depression behind and she will just be healed and be able to have a good life. The topic of this book just seems super intriguing. I think that when I was actually reading this book, I didn't realize that I didn't enjoy it very much, because it is like an engaging book. You're never bored when you're reading this book. There's always something going on. This book was disappointing because it didn't do anything with the plot point that it gave me. And it's so upsetting because generally the concept of this book had so much potential, and it could have been such an impactful book on how depression affects people and maybe their surroundings and stuff like that. But it just didn't do that. It really wasn't as groundbreaking as I guess I was hoping that it would be, because of how much people hype up this book. One thing that I did find good, I guess, about this book is that it was interesting for me to see the difference of mental health issues and how people deal with mental health when it came to the main character versus her best friend. Her best friend would cope by desperately being positive and just trying so hard to see the positive in things, and the main character would cope through detachment. So that is a contrast that I thought was interesting when it came to speaking about mental health and how different people cope. The ending of this book was really abrupt and random, and I feel like he really didn't bring anything to the story. The ending just really didn't make sense to me when it comes to these characters and their story. This didn't bring any content to the table, anything new, anything interesting about the fact that this person was the person that they were, because the reason that I wanted to read this book was because of the fact that like you're seeing this very specific person, and I wanted to see how this specific type of person is going to live through these mental health struggles, but I still didn't get that either. Last book that I read is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Machado. This book is short stories on the bodies of women. I did only buy this book because I wanted to read the story about the lady with the green ribbon on her neck, because it's been circulating and I was intrigued. So I bought this book. I had no idea what I was gonna read. I haven't read a short stories book before, and this one was very like unconventional, I would say, in the way that it was put together. Literally a whole section of this book is just Law and Order episodes. She essentially made this book to talk about women's bodies, the way that our bodies are like disrespected. So it was interesting to read about women's issues through stories. And the Law and Order part, she just grabs an excerpt of the episode, but each excerpt that she grabs is just so important because it talks about women being violated and stuff like that. She grabbed like a paragraph from like these episodes, but they were so impactful when she put it all together. I think that how she spoke about issues through like different things is very interesting, because when I'm watching movies or reading books that are talking about like a specific fictional concept, sometimes it just like clicks in your mind that like, oh, this could relate to this that happens in real life or stuff like that, and you can just make a lot of connections. And it's very interesting to see how people in their artwork kind of put things together and make connections on different subjects and different things, and it becomes very valuable and impactful. So yeah, I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I hope that you enjoyed this video. I still am going through the process of clearing up my shelves and reading the books that I've just haven't read before, but I think that right now I am getting into books that I truly appreciate, and realizing that my taste in books has changed immensely from when I first started reading, even from when I went back into reading until now. I think you're going to be able to see the difference in my book videos, how I have these books that I have from before that were like fictional books, mostly, you know, young adult fantasy and stuff like that, and how I've kind of veered completely in the opposite direction because I have like a newfound interest for books that are more like adult and educational and valuable to me. So yeah, I hope that you enjoy seeing like my journey, I guess, with reading. People always ask me for book recommendations and ask me how they can get into reading, I guess, and it's a process sometimes, you know, to find books that you generally feel like connected to, and books that you will forever, you know, remember, and you feel like they have generally contributed something valuable to yourself as a person. And as my book taste changes, I think I'm beginning to find books that I find more valuable now to myself. And I hope that with any of these book recommendations, you can also find books that you find valuable and that, you know, will bring something to your life.